well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Emma Schwartz. I'm CEO of Paso-Juarez. Welcome to our last keynote speech of this summit. Paso-Juarez was founded with the intention of connecting the medical device manufacturing ecosystem to identify common opportunities and challenges that would benefit the manufacturers as well as the ecosystem as a whole. Our members include over 40 industry leaders and supporting organizations that have invested in realizing the full potential of the medical device manufacturing industry in our region, which currently employs over 40,000 individuals. The US-Mexico border is a robust and sophisticated manufacturing powerhouse. In Ciudad Juarez alone, there are more than 400 manufacturing facilities in a wide range of industries with manufacturing workforce of over 250,000 people. Medical devices account for about 10% of the manufacturing sector, with approximately 40 manufacturing facilities and a supply chain and manufacturing system that ebbs and flows across both sides of the border, taking advantage of the infrastructure, workforce, laws, costs, and other factors on each side to deliver one unified, unique, efficient, productive, and high-quality ecosystem. The contribution that our region makes to the medical device market in the United States is substantial. As we've heard over the past couple of days, Mexico is the #1 exporter of medical devices to the United States, and Ciudad Juarez is the #1 exporter of medical devices in all of Mexico. The medical device industry is not only growing and technologically advanced, it also has a direct impact on health, which we have most certainly seen during this pandemic. Paso-Juarez is excited to work with our members and partners to ensure that the industry grows here in this region to benefit the medical needs of the world and create a robust economic engine in our region. Now, we are very excited to welcome Deloitte for our closing keynote this afternoon to share their research on smart manufacturing, what it is and what it means for the medtech industry, and how connected ecosystems can help achieve smart manufacturing initiatives. As a reminder, today's session is being recorded and will be available on demand. We will have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation, so please utilize the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Alex Bredemus, Senior Manager at Deloitte. Alex is a leader in Deloitte's consulting practice with over 15 years experience in manufacturing strategy and smart operations. Alex has led multiple manufacturing strategy, smart factory, capacity expansion, and operations improvement engagements, primarily in the medical device industry, but also across discrete manufacturing. While in industry, Alex was an advanced manufacturing engineer responsible for commercializing and scaling new products. At Boston Scientific, he led several operations, drove lean and smart factory concepts into new product launches. He brings deep experience from within the medtech industry, but also from other high volume, highly automated, and highly regulated industries such as automotive. Elizabeth Beck is a manager at Deloitte. She has over 13 years experience in smart manufacturing, operations, and supply chain in the medical device industry. Elizabeth has led multiple MES implementations, manufacturing productivity improvements, and enjoys helping her clients not just implement technology, but ultimately derive the business value from that technology. While in industry, Elizabeth was a director of supply chain and director of operations, responsible for both the supply chain and manufacturing facilities producing implantable medical devices. At St. Jude Medical, she was responsible for implementing MES, product transfer, and inventory reduction efforts. Elizabeth has an MBA and BSc in mechanical engineering and brings deep experience from within the medtech industry, but also from high volume and highly automated industries such as consumer products. We're very happy to have you with us today and can't wait to hear from you.
Thank you, Emma.
Great. Thanks, Emma. As we get into our presentation here, so thank you everyone for having us today. We're excited to share with you our perspective on smart manufacturing as it applies to the medtech industry, where Elizabeth and I spend nearly all of our time. A lot of exciting changes taking place right now in the industry. So Elizabeth, next slide, please. We've went through a brief introduction I think you can say both Elizabeth and I live and breathe smart operations in medtech. Both are involved in projects right now doing just that with medtech clients, and we're excited to share our perspective with you today. So I'm going to hand it to Elizabeth, and she's going to get started talking about and sharing with you some of our perspectives on specifically how it relates to the medtech industry.
Thank you, Alex. Before we dive into kind of the ecosystem play that exists relative to Smart Factory, we really kind of wanted to spend some time setting the stage for what Smart Factory really means in the medical device space, because what we found is sometimes there's misconceptions out there, but there's also a ton of opportunity out there, but there's also challenges that the medical device industry inherently has. And with Alex and I both playing in this space, we are very familiar with kind of the challenges that you all face on a regular basis relative to what some other industries find easy may not be as easy in the medical device space. So, just to talk about some of the industry dynamics, right? There's the pressure to reduce costs. That's not new to any of us, right? There's a slower adoption of new technologies, both in products as well as in processes due to, long regulatory cycles, as well as the regulatory requirements of product validation and process validation. There's barriers to rapid manufacturing changes because of those regulations. And there's historically been limited investment in the manufacturing processes post-launch and stabilization. So once it kind of hits manufacturing, that's kind of how it exists, aside from your manufacturing engineers coming along and improving product processes and products. So those complicating factors speaking to that is, and this is one of the things I love about the medical device space, is the scale and diversity of both the products and the processes in the medical device space. And so I've been very, very fortunate in that I've got to spend in my career in the medical device space everything from very small pediatric implantables to capital equipment that's medical device that gets installed into a hospital. And so I've gotten to kind of run the gamut with multiple different types of manufacturing. For a mechanical engineer like me, that is part of the fun part, but that's also part of the complicated part. For the industry, right? Because it's not as easy as some other industries where it's a production fill line, where you're just putting different products in bottles continually. And so that presents inherent challenges specifically to the Smart Factory as well. There's also a general lack of standardization in equipment, IT, OT. A lot of the medical device, companies that the larger ones have come together by growth through acquisition. Sometimes there's assimilation, sometimes there's not. You guys all live and breathe this on a regular basis, but that can lead to a lack of standardization. There's also the concept of, no one size fits all Smart Factory solution. So Alex will speak to some of this later on in the presentation. But really, to say, hey, because of the diversity in products and processes in manufacturing, there's not just hey, this is the golden ticket for Smart Factory. This is what every single medical device manufacturer should be doing. It really is a customized strategy. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Again, another complicating factor is, new technology and kind of testing that in a production environment is challenging at best, because, we realize that, there are production numbers that need to be met. We've lived and breathed that again. And so, that can be a challenge, unless, there's a prototype environment, and those can be costly and very expensive. And then also, and this isn't unique to medical device, this is something we see with our clients across industry, is, it's sometimes challenging to justify investments in the short term. So sometimes there's infrastructure you have to put into place, or in the short term, that don't necessarily pay off with the first use case, but pay off with that strategy. And that's where that strategy becomes important. And we'll talk more about that as well. So just to give you a little preview of coming attractions, we do recommend developing a vision strategy, and again, rooted in value and not capabilities. So don't look for, hey, what's the newest Smart Factory technology? Look internal to what problem are you trying to solve? And then how can we use Smart Factory applications to help solve those problems that you guys live and breathe every day? So also our strategic recommendations are to think big, but start small, which allows you to then scale fast. That is not unique to Smart Factory, but we found that it's an effective strategy. And then another thing that is critically important, specifically for medical devices, is that quality, regulatory, operations, and IT all have to come to the table and be aligned on what that strategy is and how that value will be derived. And so we just want to acknowledge that in the context of what we're talking about here today. So what makes a factory smart, right? You can kind of see and read the slide, but really the biggest takeaway from this is that a smart factory is connected, it's optimized, transparent, agile, and proactive, right? And so when we look at our production floors, let's look at the information that we have available today coming off of those production floors, what we're using it for, what gaps exist, and what additional information could be utilized to help drive improvements on the production floor. We also kind of want to dispel the concept that smart factory is investments in robots, automation, and factory redesign. It's really not, and it doesn't have to be. And so there's this misconception out there that smart factories are automation. Automation can be a form of smart factory technology, but there are a lot of smart factory solutions that we're going to talk about in this presentation that aren't necessarily robots, automation, or require a factory redesign. Another point that we want to make is, when we talk to a lot of clients about, hey, is now the right time for us to be going on this smart factory journey, right? Sometimes they say, oh, but we just did a lean journey. So is there any additional value we can get from that? Or we haven't done lean yet, so we need to do lean first before we can do smart factory. What our message is on this is that if you've already done lean, and if you're really, really good at lean operations, then smart factory can give you added additional value when things are even more complex. If you're an organization that hasn't done lean yet, smart factory can still be done either in parallel or without lean concepts, depending on your preference, to kind of accelerate the value you derive from it. And what you see over there on the right-hand side of the slide is what we have seen our clients be able to derive relative to value. So improved asset availability, yield improvements, which is a big one for all of us, right? Cost reduction, and then time to quality volume improvement. And what that one specifically refers to is when a new product is launched, how long does it take us until we get to steady state and the yields we expect? So there we go on that one. For this next one, I want to introduce our MAPI study. So Deloitte, along with MAPI, did a smart factory study. We're going to reference 2 of the studies we've done with MAPI. And really it looked at smart factory and smart factory application. The MAPI study broke smart factory technologies into 8 different use cases. Think of these as categories of use cases. These aren't the only options out there, but these are, we call them, kind of the grade 8 that we speak to and that we're talking to clients about. I'll just run through them very, very quickly here. The first one, factory asset intelligence and performance management. Our example here is a plant control tower, right? I'm in charge of a manufacturing floor and I want to know exactly the status of all of my equipment on that production floor in terms of how it's running, in terms of what it's outputting, in terms of what it's doing, right? And so really being able to have that consolidated view on how everything fits together. The next one is a big one, and Alex will speak a little bit more to it, but it's quality sensing and detection, right? And so you may have some of this on your production floor today, and you're probably already deriving value from this. But we want to move that quality sensing and detection away from reactionary, which a lot of it today is a reaction, and more towards predictive quality analysis. So what if we could tell that an operator was getting tired before they created a defect, right? Or what if we could tell the vibration on a piece of equipment was suggesting that it needed maintenance before it produced a bad part? And so we have a lot of partnerships in this realm that provide that we can come to market with our clients too. The next one is factory synchronization and dynamic scheduling. When we think scheduling a medical device, you can't just think scheduling the equipment like you can in high volume, high process. You also have to think, how am I going to schedule my people, right? And we know that We know that not all pieces of equipment are created equal, and we know that not all people are created equal depending on the task. And so what we're seeing here is really a lot of AI, artificial intelligence, used to optimize who goes where or what runs on what piece of equipment. And so that's a really exciting area. The next one is a personal favorite of mine. When I got into the medical device space, I was surprised, honestly, at how manual so many of the processes were, again, coming from consumer products, high volume industries. And so the augmented workforce efficiency really rings true for me. And this is something that's amazing to me that it's a reality now, whereas 15 years ago it wasn't. And what I like to think of is the use case of an operator, right? And all the time and effort and energy we spend in training an operator. So if instead we use AR, VR combined with quality sensing and detection, really the amount of training that operator needs can be minimal, because they put on their AR, VR glasses and they see exactly what they're supposed to be piecing together while they're piecing it together. And then subsequently too, the quality sensing and detection can give them that feedback that they're doing it appropriately. And so that's a pretty fun one for me, and one that I really like talking about with clients. Plant consumption and energy management. For this one, don't just think energy management, but think how you control your environment, which we know is very, very important for the medical device industry. Additive manufacturing, 3D printing. There's been a slew of articles in the news lately about what the automotive industry is doing relative to this. I think this is, personally, I think this is underutilized in the medical device space, and I think there's more opportunity for that, both for prototyping parts as well as tools, again, allowing for more rapid iteration and improvements. Smart conveyance, again, AGVs, all of that kind of stuff, that's not new, but we acknowledge that as a use case. And then the engineering collaboration with the digital twin. So, looking at that and saying, predicting what will be happening, and, how we take that data and make adjustments to optimize our production floor in a digital environment without actually implementing. So with that, I will hand it over to Alex.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So as Elizabeth mentioned, we work with the Manufacturers Alliance for Productivity Improvement, and have been doing a smart factory survey for a few years with them, and recently did a follow-up survey of manufacturers kind of post-COVID, and wanted to see how the pandemic has affected their smart factory journeys. We found some very interesting things as we went through. So you'll see the same great 8 use cases here on the left side that Elizabeth introduced us to just a second ago. And first of all, what we saw is that most of them were investing in part in all of these use cases, right? You can see the numbers, a lot of 70s and 80% on the right side. Those are respondents who've actually made these investments. But really the aha was that a lot of them aren't quite realizing and operationalizing them as effectively as they thought they could. You can see the numbers on the left side of the spectrum. Some were more successful than others. I think things around plant consumption and energy management maybe have more broadly applicable out-of-the-box solutions to use than some of the other ones that maybe need to be more bespoke for your operation. But by and large, I think there's a gap that we found very interesting that we wanted to learn more about. Next slide, please. So we wanted to see, how did they react during the pandemic? I think as we got to see kind of how our personal clients navigated this in our projects. It was interesting to see how they responded to the survey as well. And so what we heard was that 4 in 10 actually paused their smart manufacturing investments during the pandemic. I saw that personally with one of my clients, and it's an understandable thing to do amidst uncertainty. But most of the people we surveyed actually plan to restart it, within the next 3 to 6 months or the next 7 to 10 months. You'll see the bulk of responses there. But I think the encouraging thing was that 62% actually are continuing their investments amidst all the uncertainty. And even more interesting, 30, they were actually increasing the share of their investment in smart manufacturing compared to our previous study the year before. So they're essentially doubling down as they're heading into the pandemic, which was very interesting. And what we saw was that it actually, that the pandemic actually made some of the use cases that had a value case before even more important. So the ability to see what's happening on your floor through more of a centralized control tower. Maybe if you're used to having paper-based systems on the floor, and now you can no longer have some of your support staff walking around the floor as nearly as much. Getting that data off the floor and digitized so you can act on it remotely, is something that everyone had to act on quickly. Another thing that we saw a lot of interest in is around workforce safety. So, a lot of plants quickly redesign, put tape on the floor, but we saw others invest in technologies to track who has been who's been close to who, and in the event that there's an outbreak in the plant or an infection, they quickly know how to act, and they can preemptively identify pinch points in the plant where they need to do kind of continuous improvement projects to reduce their risk. So those are just a couple examples we saw. There's a lot of other ones, but I thought it was kind of interesting that the respondents are a lot of them are full steam ahead or even going faster. Great. Next one. So how are companies achieving this, right? We've talked about the grade 8 use cases. We've talked about how they're doubling down on their investments, but are they doing it themselves? Are they working with others? That was another question that we asked. And what we found is that 73% are working with outside partners, very often at a manufacturing site level, or even within a large manufacturer. You don't have all the capabilities that are required to build out some of these more advanced solutions, especially because they're going to be very bespoke to your plant and the manufacturing challenges that apply to your particular type of product and equipment that you have in your facility. So so companies have largely worked with outside partners to help enable their team. But then to what extent are they working with them? So, again, we like to think of the spectrum from not working with anyone externally to having a full ecosystem approach. And you can kind of see where people responded down below. Most are working with other people, and they're either in the planning stages for development or they've started to establish some of those strategic relationships. But they're doing that kind of on a one-off basis. They might have picked a couple people that they want to work with, and started, and maybe they're people who are their historical machine vendors or some of their manufacturing application providers. But only 16% indicated that they've actually started to knit together an ecosystem and work with an ecosystem of providers. So we found that very interesting, and wanted to learn more about that. Next slide, please. So the other interesting thing is that 90% said that growing their ecosystem is an important part of their success in smart manufacturing. So everyone thought it was important. Not a lot of people had got very far in that journey at this point. So we think that that's very interesting, and over the next several years is going to evolve as this space quickly has over the last couple of years, as these ecosystems start to form and new solutions are created. So what is an ecosystem? So basically, an ecosystem is a collection of different entities that come together to meet a shared objective. So so sometimes you might have an ecosystem of your plant, like in the upper left corner here where you have your plant has built an ecosystem around it of existing operational technology vendors, so who provides your PLCs and your hardware and your servers and those types of things. Your IT software vendors who provides maybe your MES or your QMS systems in the plant. And then your physical automation and robot vendors, right? A lot of times those are regional or local companies in the medtech industry. We see that quite a bit as a lot of the innovation happens in different pockets around the country. But that'll only get kind of used so far. So some of the more advanced solutions, you look around things like quality sensing. You might need a combination of hardware providers. You might need AI companies. You might need somebody who can classify defects and build your kind of digital plant defect book. You might need PLM providers, right, to have access to kind of to some of the design documentation to weave that into the ecosystem, and maybe you might need academics or or other providers as well. You might need to stitch that into a kind of a core IoT or smart factory solution as well. So you can not just kind of have a camera making decisions, but you can kind of make it as part of your whole way of working in your plant. So what we find is to build an ecosystem to solve that problem, computer vision, quality sensing problem, it's often hard for one company to do, across all the various applications. So what we have seen is ecosystem conveners form, and they're people who have kind of picked different problems that they want to address, and piece together the different ecosystem entities and built a solution that is better than what any one entity could kind of come up with out of the box. So we see that as a very powerful direction that the smart manufacturing is headed, and is certainly going to very quickly evolve over the coming years. There might be a different ecosystem around predictive maintenance. That's another popular use case, specifically for some of the more automated parts of medtech. And again, you might have something around your operational technology companies, probably hardware, sensors, your machine providers. You might have an industry working group for other companies that do similar types of welding processes or bonding processes that might convene around solving a particular problem. So all very exciting progress as we see these ecosystems form. But it doesn't come without challenges and risks. I think it can be coordinating the different ecosystems can be complex. Kind of where to start, do you reach out and try to form an ecosystem? Do you try to subscribe to one? It's a fluid process. So, forming them can be difficult. Data protection and cybersecurity are top of mind. So, as you start to stitch together solutions that have various parties as part of your solution stack, how do you keep everyone that's involved in that and solving that problem? How do you keep your data safe? How do you keep your IP safe? If you have other parties from your industry, from the med tech industry that are part of your consortium, how do you leverage developing a solution without giving away any of the intellectual property or details about your process? Those are all things that we see people commonly think about. And then finally, the skills and capabilities vary across the factory quite a bit. So you might have one factory that might be ready for convening an ecosystem, and others that kind of need some more foundational groundwork before they're ready to subscribe. So wanted to kind of loop back to something Elizabeth said is, what does a smart factory journey look like, and how do we see people start? So, we use the moniker, think big, start small, and scale fast. And, thinking big is really important. We see a lot of companies, especially in the med tech industry, and we're probably guiltier than a lot of the other industries that my colleagues work in, but of doing experimentation. We love to innovate in med tech. Often I'll see within one company different groups of people developing the same kind of technology in different plants and different divisions, around the company. Not have a broader vision or a broader investment strategy in your smart factory. So innovation is great, but in this case with smart manufacturing, achieving the scale in your investment and the results you're looking for, you do want to start with a very broad, big vision that everyone is working towards. Then you start small and you figure out, how do you solve the problem for a large enough chunk of your operation, that you're going to drive business value. Thinking that it's going to apply, every use case is going to apply to all of your plants and all of your situations, that's just not the case in med tech. So you got to kind of pick the right use cases for the right plants. But again, the use cases you choose to invest in need to be applicable in enough places to justify your investment. And then scale fast. So how quickly can you create a standard solution that is configurable and usable by the next site that you can then rapidly deploy across your network. And thinking carefully about that upfront, using an ecosystem are ways that we've seen companies approach that. So that wraps up our presentation part of the session here, and I see we've got a number of questions. So I don't know if someone wants to ask us them or if we should run down the list.
Okay, so we do have quite a few questions coming here, so that's exciting. Where do we start? So here's one. What role does talent play in developing a smart manufacturing ecosystem? And is it possible to have a smart manufacturing ecosystem without a cohesive talent pipeline?
I'll go ahead and take a stab at that one. We have a slide that we unfortunately did not have room for in this deck that addressed that very question, right? Because there's IT, there's OT, along with, what type of operator on the production floor are we looking for now, right? How is that role, if and how is that changing, right? They had to write on paper before, now they're entering something in the equipment. So based on that is why that strategy kind of at the beginning is so critical, right? Because if what you're doing is you're implementing like one sensor or one technology, and that is the beginning of the strategy, you need to make sure you're kind of ahead of that. And that's something that a lot of our clients work with us on specifically, is what's that talent strategy, talent, and then another one, I'm going to throw this one in for free, but talent and security as well. A lot of our clients come to us and say, okay, now we're doing all of this digital stuff, right? We're doing digital, we're living digital. How do we make sure we have the people and the security that we need? And so, that's really a big thing and a big part of that strategy. As I mentioned, Alex, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you hit it right on.
Well, I think that workforce is one of those areas that is difficult to solve on your own. And this is one of those ecosystem questions, and how you're involving your larger ecosystem and your workforce groups and your institutions of higher education to support this work.
Yeah, we just did something with a couple of Big 10 universities around those very same lines, right? Like, what do we need you guys to be teaching people in their MBA programs and their undergraduate engineering programs? Because it's not the same as it was 25 years ago. So great point.
Great, awesome, thank you. Okay, next question we have. As part of your survey of manufacturers, was commitment on the part of manufacturers a limiting factor on how rapidly they incorporate CapEx into their businesses?
Yeah, I'm not certain that we asked the question quite that way in the survey. I'll have to look back, but a commitment I can talk from my experience, but commitment is really a big part of it. The smart manufacturing journey has to be seen as a strategic imperative for the business, right? It can't just be about implementing a use case to save X amount in one plant. You're never going to get there that way. So, getting that big vision we talked about, gaining that commitment from the top, and I've seen it work different ways where sometimes it's kind of like they get the commitment at the top. There's some pool of kind of funding to develop a solution, but then each plant has to kind of put some skin in the game to implement and realize the benefits and commit to savings. That way works. I've also seen a little more of kind of a Shark Tank type approach where you got a pool of funds, people come with ideas, they say, hey, we want to develop this type of a use case. Here's what we think it could mean. They evaluate how much value it's going to drive in that plant and across the network, and they fund things that way. Both have worked, and it depends on the culture in your company, which one would work better. But commitment either way is key to success in the smart manufacturing.
Great. Okay, next question we have. It says from Jack, I loved the overview of the great 8 use cases. What use cases are most medtech companies starting their smart factory journey on?
This is a fun one, Alex. I'll take a stab and then I'll let you piggyback because we get to kind of be and live in this, right? And so really the big ones that we see them starting with are really from my perspective, and the ones I've been involved with a couple, that quality sensing and the predictive analytics is a big one, specifically in the med tech space. And another one that a lot of the industry does not view as a smart factory capability is an MES system, so manufacturing execution system. And that's a really good place to kind of start your smart factory foundation, because really what it does is it digitizes kind of that first layer of information on your production floor, and then you can kind of build from that. Alex, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, and I think I would tuck in the MES almost into that digital product development, digital twin. But one thing that's interesting, again, Elizabeth mentioned how diverse medtech is. So there's different segments of medtech have different use cases have resonated. I work with some highly automated that are making consumable products. Their factory asset intelligence, which would contain things like predictive maintenance, OEE improvement, those are major drivers for their business, and those use cases make sense there. But in a more manual assembly type operation that might be making components, like Elizabeth said, quality is a big one, as well as the factory synchronization and what we call crew planning, which is even more stretched right now as finding the right people with the right certifications for our clients to maintain the supply of critical medical devices, and this time is challenged by plant quarantines and attendance on a day in and day out basis.
Great, thank you. Next question we have is, creating a smart manufacturing ecosystem seems like a long-term strategy. Is there a timeline or examples of how long it can take to create everything required to achieve smart manufacturing ecosystem?
Yeah, I'll take a quick stab at this and then I'll pass it over to you, Alex. Yes, I mean, we kind of started right with that think big, right? Setting that strategy. And so kind of acknowledging that, hey, if we're going to dive in and if we're going to commit to an ecosystem play, that is a long-term thing. But what we're also seeing too is that our clients are committing to this in a long-term fashion. And so that's really where kind of marrying up the strategy along with the funding, both at a corporate and kind of a more local level, is so critical. And so, yes, relative to what that looks like, what the standard one looks like for medtech, that's much tougher to answer, primarily because with the clients we go into, each client is in a different place. right? And so they're starting from a different place. And so much of it has to do with where are you at? What problems are you trying to solve? And then kind of that's where we come in and do that analysis and provide a recommendation on, hey, what should your 3 to 5 year strategy be on this, right? What should you be doing POV wise, proof of value wise right now? You know, what are some of these partnerships, these alliances that you should be making now? And so, you know, it's really a much longer answer than what we can provide here. And it is based very, very much so on the individual, you know, organization situation. Alex?
Yeah, I agree, and you know, it's something that definitely takes time, and you know, it takes months to years, I would say, and but there's no finish line. That's the other thing, is that you create an ecosystem that's made up of different components, and you know, the right ecosystem partner that provides something today, 5 years from now, they might be a laggard in that particular capability, and you might want to swap them out for someone else. So it is something that, you know, it does require investment, so that there is, you can't be changing things in and out too frequently, but you know, you need to be constructed so that it's not reliant on any kind of one component too much.
Sure. I'm going to jump in with my own question here. So for companies who are on the fence, right, knowing that it's going to take a lot of commitment, financial resources, time resources, et cetera, to go down this pathway, can you point to examples of where it has had a positive or negative impact? Those who have gone into it have seen increases in clients or decreased costs, et cetera, versus those who have said, you know, we're not ready to make that, and seeing their clientele move elsewhere or other problems. How can you convince these people on the fence to move forward is kind of the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it, you know, in med tech, there's certainly the cost aspect, and that is the same that applies to every other industry. But what we've really seen is the quality story, right? And a lot of times, you know, something happens, and it's easy to come back in retrospect and put in place a solution. But you know, how do you stop the next Kappa or the next recall or 483 from happening? And you know, that has to be part of the equation, and you know, aligns with your strategy and your mission and values as a company. So I mean, I think that's part of this. That's part of it. But you know, being able to tie back how specifically a particular capability, you know, would have solved a problem in the past, or you know, will solve something that could happen in the future, is important. And if you can't really articulate that, it's hard for people to subscribe to the concept in general. And you know, so that's just what I've seen.
And a lot of our clients bring us in to do just that, right? So they say, you know, hey, what is the value we're given where we're at today, you know, do an assessment. What's the value we realistically think we can derive in the next 6 months, in the next 1 year, you know, provide recommendations for us. And so, you know, the question you ask is a question we get asked a lot, and we enjoy having that conversation with the clients as well, because, you know, there are some quick POVs that can be done in less than 6 months that can start yielding, you know, value kind of right away. And so, you know, while we're having those conversations around that long-term strategy and kind of using that to justify going on.
And I actually do see a question right in line with that about, can you share an example of business value derived through this? And so thank you for kind of answering that also. Here's another question. For large manufacturing facilities with corporate structures that leave strategic decision-making out of the production line, what options exist to implement smart manufacturing? Put another way, is corporate buy-in absolutely required to implement or connect a smart manufacturing ecosystem?
Or maybe put another way, and I can put it this way that maybe someone else couldn't, is to say, yeah, and if corporate's not behind you, is this still something I can do, kind of thing. So yeah, and the answer is, of course, yes, that obviously factors into kind of what that strategy looks like and everything. But we have seen, you know, mighty manufacturing facilities without corporate support kind of do what they need to do to improve their own operations, and I would say if you're doing that now without smart manufacturing, smart manufacturing will only enhance your ability to do that, right? So it's definitely possible. Alex, what are your thoughts on that?
I think what it does is it makes the the number of use cases that you can implement is maybe a little bit narrower, because it would have to be things that really drive the value to develop the capability just for your plant, right? So when you start to get a more of a corporate program, then you get to start to leverage the development of the application or whatever capability, and then share it across the company. So typically there'd be fewer use cases that would make sense to develop just for one plant than you would with for the corporate level. The other thing is, a lot of times I've found that at a site level you end up with corporate, you get some constraints around corporate preferred cloud providers and corporate preferred, and you might not have the control to create your own little ecosystem to the extent you might want to. So it is a challenge, but I do think there's value, particularly for your certain use cases.
Well, here we have a very practical question. Who or what area is responsible for implementing smart manufacturing practice in the medical industry? IT, new products, quality?
Yeah, the answer is all of the above, right? But where we practically see it play out is a lot within the manufacturing itself. And so it might be, a quality improvement, but, who's ultimately responsible for that P&L at the end of the day? And usually it's not a quality organization, right? And so, it kind of depends on who owns the metrics that are benefiting. And that's usually kind of how that conversation kind of turns back around. And that's who. Now, that doesn't mean that we aren't approached by, by corporate IT, that we aren't approached by the quality organization. Those conversations, those conversations can look a little bit different though, right? They're looking to set up more of those ecosystem plays and do more of that strategy, right? From the quality standpoint, when they approach us, they're looking more for how do I get that product, that digital product thread, all the way from development, all the way through to feedback from our customers and things like that. And so, but all of these, speak to that digital transformation. And so, it depends kind of who you're talking to. It can come from any place, but kind of depending on where it comes from is, kind of feeds into what it looks like then.
And I was just going to add, the last 3 times I've done this, it's been both. They've been joint, and that I think that's critical for success. Now, when I say joint, I mean the business and the operation and IT. Quality is usually part of it, but they're usually not the driver of it. IT and the business, are usually hand in hand.
Sure. Now, are there any FDA compliance challenges that deserve special consideration or focus in a smart factory journey?
Yeah, yes, of course. Yeah, and it's a fantastic question. What it comes down to a lot for us is relative to, we talked about a lot of different use cases in a short amount of time today, right? And so I know you guys are all familiar with the industry and how kind of things play into that, right? Like, could I go to the FDA and say, I don't need to train my operators anymore because I have augmented reality and I have a vision inspection system? Like that conversation is, perhaps not an easy conversation to have. But what we see is that, so there's training requirements that come in play depending on what it is, right? There's obviously process validation is a big one, right? There can be product validation that gets impacted in requirements and development and things like that. And so, we have to abide by all of those requirements within this industry, which speaks to kind of one of the first slides we went over, right? What are some of the challenges in the med tech industry that other industries don't have to deal with? It makes it easier for them, but that doesn't preclude us from being able to. And I would argue it even allows us to derive more value from it than if we didn't have.
Great. Well, we still have a lot of questions, even though we're running short on time. So I just got the note saying we can still take a couple more questions, if that's okay with everybody. I think one thing we're learning is that this is a hot topic that hopefully we can continue to discuss in the future. But here's another one. Do factories need to implement all smart factory use cases to be considered smart, or is there a spectrum?
Yeah, that's a Fantastic question, and the answer is unequivocally no, which is why you saw Alex and I shake our heads no, right? It's not a one size fits all. I like to think of it more as like a restaurant with a really huge menu, right? You're never really going to order everything on that menu. You have your go-tos, right? That you like to go to, or that that resonate most with you, and so really it's about identifying, taking everything that's out there, and again, not starting with the technology, but starting with what are our biggest challenges that we're trying to solve. Alex, you want to?
Yeah, no, I think that's just it. The only thing I would say is, you're smart when you're moving towards, that the slide that we showed where, human intelligence augmented by data and by decision science, and when you're moving in that direction, and you have the characteristics that we showed around the little loop there, then you're smart. It's not a matter of checking certain boxes within the use case menu.
Great, thank you. And here's a fun question. I had never thought of the value of ecosystems. Can you provide an example or two of ecosystems that you have seen come together?
Yeah, I mean, we think about use cases. I think about maybe starting a manufacturing line and combining simulation, a plant simulation with process and product simulation, some of the IE tools, and combining that into kind of a digital twin that you then use to manage your line on a go forward basis. That's something I've seen recently, and that required the assembly of several different companies and ecosystem players. Or another one I'd say, I worked with a client that worked closely with a university that was doing research on predictive maintenance, and that combined with their equipment vendors, combined with an IoT platform provider, they were able to construct a solution that was nothing you could get off the shelf, that was solve their problem better than anything off the shelf would have done. So those are just a couple I've seen. Elizabeth?
And if I don't know who asked this question, but if anyone on this call is more interested in looking at kind of what that ecosystem relative to a smart factory could look like, we do have an example of that. Deloitte does with a smart factory at Wichita State University. And so if anyone is interested in kind of seeing that play out, there's actually product that's made there that has kind of the whole ecosystem built around it. Now, we're not doing it to make profit off that product. So we had the ability to move very, very fast and kind of put that ecosystem together as an example, not necessarily that's what everyone's ecosystem should look like, but as an example of what that ecosystem could look like. And so if anyone's interested in kind of diving more into what that ecosystem could look like, we would be happy to have follow-up conversations with anyone and do either an in-person visit, once the world changes, or a virtual visit to our smart factory at Wichita.
That would be amazing. And we'll get with you after this to make sure that we can make that happen.
Awesome.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Elizabeth and Alex, for that wonderful presentation. We really appreciate Deloitte's research and work in this area, and for enlightening us today with your insights. I can't think of a better way to wrap up our third annual Medical Device Summit and Trade Show. BioEL Paso-Juarez understands how important manufacturing ecosystems are to the strength and growth of the medical device industry in our region. And that includes not only manufacturing, but also supply chain, product development, and innovation. We've dedicated ourselves to being the ecosystem convener for you, and we will continue to play this important role. We encourage you to reach out to us, connect, engage, and create networks within the ecosystem as you continue your efforts to become a smart manufacturer and producer. We know that smart manufacturers and connected ecosystems lead to expanded innovation capacity, more new product development and introduction, and digital maturity, all of which contribute to the economic growth and prosperity of our region. Today's virtual exhibit hall is a great place to make some of these connections. There's still time to visit with our exhibitors and schedule B2B meetings. In fact, I also want to remind you that all the presentations from the last 2 days will be up on this platform for about a month. So please feel free to go back and watch again or refer to a colleague. And before we close, I'd like to once again thank our summit sponsors, RexMed Healthcare, Ingenio RX, and Avanti Medicare, as well as the City of El Paso for their support. I'd also like to thank all of Bio El Paso Juarez's members and summit speakers for helping to make these last 2 days a great success. And of course, to the Bio El Paso Juarez staff, Jackie Butler, Cecilia Varela, and Christian Botello, and New Discovery Media for organizing this exciting event. We hope that you have gained valuable information and a deeper understanding of the challenges and opportunities facing the industry and our region over the course of this summit. We encourage you to visit us at bioelpasojuarez.org to join our efforts and ecosystem. We have task forces working on the local value supply chain and innovation, as well as talent development, and we would love to work with you. Lastly, thanks to you all in the medical device industry for the work that you do to create and produce medical devices and supplies that save lives every day. You are our heroes. We wish you well as we continue in the fight against COVID-19. Please be safe and have a wonderful holiday season and Happy New Year. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.